Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. In our Old Testament reading, we're reading about Job getting a lesson from God as God speaks to him out of the whirlwind. And Job gets a pretty firm lesson from God about how God is sovereign, that he is the creator and the sustainer of all creation, and that God holds the right to allow even righteous people to suffer. And then we find in 2 Corinthians the Apostle Paul talking in the context of suffering, even though he and his companions were faithful ministers of the word, yet they were suffering immensely because of it, yet they were enduring it because of the eternal truths they had come to put their faith in, and they were enduring horrific things that many people would not be able to endure or to persevere through, and yet they were enduring it, being faithful to God. And then in the book of Psalms, we read about how God's people were being persecuted and being mistreated, and there's a call to God to help those who were his own. And as we read the book of Romans, we see that in all likelihood it was prophetic in connection to the Christians who would be persecuted for their faith and would cry out to God for vindication. But then, when we get to the book of Proverbs, this is what we read. In Proverbs chapter 22 and in verse 13, it says, "The sluggard says, 'There's a lion outside. I will be killed in the streets.'" What a contrast between Job and 2 Corinthians with Paul, and then with Psalms talking about the persecuted people of God. Here you have a person who doesn't even want to go outside and work because he is making the excuse that there's a lion out there and he would get eaten. Basically just making an excuse not to work. And as we reflect on this, and as we see this great contrast, we can see that this might reflect many Christians today. Isn't it true oftentimes, even though we read passages like we read in Job, and then also when we read about the ministry of Paul and how he suffered great hardship for Christ, and we even read in the Psalms of how the righteous endure very horrific things in following the Lord, and they cry out to God. And we read about all these passages, but practically in our lives, we make excuses not to fully dive into the work of the kingdom because of imagined dangers that might lay ahead. We too, perhaps like the sluggard, say, "There is a lion outside. I will be killed in the streets." In other words, we don't want to even come close to having to suffer for the sake of the work of the kingdom. And therefore, any danger that we can conceive of or that we can imagine is enough to deter us from actually going out and being diligent in doing the work of the Lord. And so oftentimes, even though we have all these examples of people who were faithful to God, suffered hardship for the sake of God, even when they didn't understand what they were going through, even though we read about these examples, when it comes to our own personal life, we back down. Even when we don't even know for sure there's even going to be a danger. We just perceive that there might be a danger, and therefore we back away. Perhaps we should reconsider our approach to the spiritual life, our approach to the work of the Lord. And say, you know what, Lord, first, I'm going to have a heart of obedience. I'm going to have a desire to be diligent for the work of the kingdom. And then, if there is a lion out there, Lord, you're strong enough to take care of the lion. It's only my part to be faithful and to be diligent, and to not be afraid of what could happen if I were to step into your will, but rather to trust that you will be with me no matter what happens as I step into your will, and that you are sovereign. You are the creator and sustainer of all creation. I must submit to your authority. I must be diligent about this wonderful, beautiful ministry you've entrusted to me. And I must understand that sometimes the righteous do suffer for doing what is right. But it's just for me to be faithful and diligent in serving you. And that's the attitude that we should have. Otherwise, we might fall into the trap that this sluggard does in Proverbs chapter 22. And back away, just stay inside, just stay in our comfort zone, just stay where it's easy so that we don't have to suffer hardship. And we can try to guarantee that we won't suffer hardship, which doesn't necessarily mean that we won't suffer hardship, but that's what we might attempt to do. So let's be encouraged by Job. Let's be encouraged, or at least the story of Job. Let's be encouraged by the Apostle Paul. Let's be encouraged by what we read in the Psalms in connection to God's people, and recognize the fact that sometimes suffering is just a part of life, and especially in connection to doing the work of the Lord. But if we will submit to the Lord, and if we'll be diligent and faithful to Him, that yes, even though the pathway might be difficult, the rewards at the end will make it more than worth it. And we'll be glad looking back that we were diligent and that we didn't back away and that we weren't following the example of the sluggard. So these are some things we can reflect on and think about as we do our reading today. With that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.